الرحمن الرحيم شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان صدق الله العلي العظيم. In the name of Allah, the All Beneficent, the All Merciful, the month of Ramadan is one in which the Quran was sent down as guidance to mankind with manifest proofs of guidance and the criterion. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 185. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We would like to welcome you all to our 2025 Shahr Ramadan program at the Islamic Center of America, hosted by the United Network of Islam. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with another opportunity in seeking closest to Him in the holy month of Ramadan. May Allah accept and reward all your efforts in worship in these blessed days and nights, inshallah. Before we get started with tonight's program, we would like to recite some verses from the Holy Quran. Please help me welcome Brother Hussein Namid to the stage after 3 loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You're going to use this? Or are you going to use this?
بسم الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها النبي لما تحرم ما أحل الله لك تبتغي مرضات أزواجك والله غفور رحيم. قد فرض الله لكم تحلة أيمانكم والله مولاكم وهو عليم الحكيم. وإذ أسر النبي إلى بعض أزواجه حديثا فلما نبأت به وأظهره الله عليه عرف بعضه وعرض عن بعض. فلما نبأها به قالت من أنبأك هذا؟ قال نبأني العليم الخبير. إن تتوبا إلى الله فقد صغت قلوبكما وإن تظاهر عليه فإن الله هو مولاه وجبريل وصالح المؤمنين والملائكة بعد ذلك ظهير. عسى ربه إن طلقكن أن يبدله أزواجا خيرا منكن مسلمات مؤمنات قانتات تائبات عابدات سائحات ثيبات وأبكارا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهلكم نار وقودها الناس والحجارة عليها ملائكة غلاظ شداد لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. يا أيها الذين كفروا لا تعتذروا اليوم إنما تجزون ما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا توبوا إلى الله توبة نصوحا عسى ربكم أن يكفر عنكم سيئاتكم ويدخلكم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار يوم لا يخزي الله والنبي والذين آمنوا معه نورهم يسعى بين أيديهم وبأيمانهم يقولون ربنا أتمن لنا نورنا واغفر لنا إنك على كل شيء قدير. يا أيها النبي جاهد الكفار والمنافقين واغلظ عليهم ومأواهم جهنم وبئس المصير. ضرب الله مثلا للذين كفروا امرأة نوح وامرأة لوط كانتا تحت عبدين من عبادنا صالحين فخانتاهما فلم يغنيا عنهم من الله شيئا وقيل ادخلا النار مع الداخلين. وضرب الله مثلا للذين آمنوا امرأة فرعون إذ قالت ربي ابني لي عندك بيتا في الجنة ونجني من فرعون وعمله ونجني من قوم الظالمين. ومريم بنت عمران التي أحصنت فرجها فنفخنا فيه من روحنا وصدقت بكلمات ربها وكتبه وكانت من القانتين. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you, Brother Ihsan. If we can give him another loud salawat. So just a few announcements before we get started with tonight's program, inshallah. If the brothers and sisters can please move up from the open spaces in the front so we can keep open seats in the back for the people walking in later. Thank you. There are papers around the hall and in front of the desks on the UNI table and on the sides for the question QR code for the Q&A after the program. If you'd like to submit a question, please scan and it will direct you to the link to submit your question, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, through the tawfiq of Allah and the efforts of the sisters and brothers of the UNI, we have made an initiative to truly dedicate our efforts in reviving the Manita bookstore in hopes that we can sincerely give proper Islamic education about our beliefs from our grand respected scholars of the modern era that have truly done great work for the sake of Allah and Islam. The Manita bookstore will be open every night during and after the month of Ramadan. If you have any questions, please see me or one of the organizers after the program. In the holy month of Ramadan, we are taking sponsors each night to help us with our UNI programming, bookstore, and so much more. In our traditions, we usually always donate on behalf of the deceased. General nightly donations are set to $100 per night and $300 to sponsor the Suhoor with a Scholar event. If you'd like to sponsor a night, please meet with me or one of the organizers after the program, inshallah. Tonight's donation is on the behalf of Hajj Narjis Baidoun, Marhum Hajj Narjis Baidoun. If we can please recite Surah Al-Fatiha on her behalf, بعد الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. And also there are sweets and goodies in the back with water and Biscoff pudding, all kinds of different desserts donated on the behalf of the Hamka family, the Antar family, the Salimi family, and the Shihab family for their deceased and loved ones. If we can please recite Surah Al-Fatiha, بعد الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله. Thank you. Make sure to keep up with the UNI on Instagram at UNIORG_. That's at UNIORG_ for weekly programs and events throughout the year. For those who don't have social media, please see me or one of the organizers after the program, inshallah. So we can put you in the WhatsApp announcements chat where all the details will also be shared there as well. So without further ado, please help me welcome my sincere friend, mentor, and brother, Samahat Sheikh Ahmad Cherri, after 3 loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
الزهراء صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل. أحسنت. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. I begin in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. May the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon His final messenger, Muhammad, and his blessed and purified progeny. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers, dear sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As promised, returning to the subject of divine love and continuing from where we left off. We said that there are two types of love: an intrinsic love, or a genuine love, and a derivative or instrumental love. And we said the difference between the two. And we highlighted that we all intrinsically have a love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we made that distinction to remind us of the hierarchy that is required to keep in mind in order for our love to be correct. Meaning that we love the Prophet, we love the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, because we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that the source of love is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in extension to our love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we love those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. And that can affect the manifestation of our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how we behave with that love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we have an incorrect understanding of that hierarchy, it could cause problems. And so we're trying to, through our intellect, intellectually understand and explore the concept of love. After making that distinction, the next natural question that one asks is, how does that love increase in intensity and how does it decrease? Why do we say it has an intensity? Because of the verse of the Holy Quran that we went over. The verse says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. Ashad, more intense. But those who have faith have a more intense, more ardent love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this love, it has an intensity. It can either be very weak or it can be intense. But since it's intrinsic and it's in every single one of us, how do we increase that love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is what we hope to address today, inshallah, and in the following nights, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Before we explore the concept of intensity, it's helpful to note that the Quran also mentions a situation in which we see a tainted form of love. I'm mentioning this to say that love alone is insufficient. A person might believe they have love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or even love for an individual, but an incorrect understanding of love, as mentioned earlier, can lead to negative manifestations and negative behaviors. For example, we look at the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. We see that his full brother, born from the same mother, and his father had a love for him, while his other brothers were consumed by envy and bore nothing but resentment. So we had two distinctions here that the Quran mentions in the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, where Nabi Yaqub loves Yusuf alayhi salam, Binyamin loves Yusuf alayhi salam, and the brothers of Yusuf take issue with that. And the Quran mentions why. It says in Surah Yusuf, surely Joseph and his brother are more beloved to our father than the rest of us. It was from a place of envy. They had a love for Yaqub. They wanted that love to be exclusive for them. So there's a certain type of love that can be mixed with envy. It can be mixed with exclusivity. It can be mixed with a certain form of possessiveness. And that's a negative form of love that's introduced to us. What does that come to show us? And what does that come to tell us? That love alone is insufficient. Some people say, but I love God, and why can't I just live my life and be a good person? and keep that love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my heart, and just be ethical to the extent that I can. I don't hurt anybody, and I try not to hurt anybody. I try not to hurt anything, and I try to lead an ethical and moral life. Is that not sufficient? That love alone is an impure form of love, because it's a mixed form of love. It's a tainted form of love. We're supposed to pursue a love that is pure, that is untainted. So how do we maintain that pure form of love? Yes, that intrinsic love is there, but if it's not directed in the right way, there are other powers that exist within us. We have an enemy that is eternal, which is the shaitan. The shaitan is the enemy of the human being. Tries to deter the individual from the right path, and tries to convince the individual that his ideas are their own. And we have another power that can influence us in a negative way, and that is our nafs. And that's why having love alone is not sufficient. You have a battle that you have to fight against the shaitan, and you have a battle you have to fight against your nafs. So there's a jihad that's required. It's love and the struggle with love. Struggle with love, jihad and nafs. In a narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was asked, and a companion called Fudail says, I asked about jihad. I asked about the concept of jihad. Is it wajib or mustahab? Is it compulsory or is it recommended? And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam responded, jihad is divided into 4 parts, 2 of which are wajib and 2 of which are mustahab. The 2 mustahab ones cannot be achieved without the 2 wajib ones. As for the first wajib jihad, it is jihad in nafs, the combat of the individual with their self. This means the struggle to ensure that oneself does not disobey God, the Almighty and Majestic. And then the Imam says, and it is the greatest of jihads. He said here that jihad in nafs, struggling against yourself, is wajib. It's not something that you can neglect. It's part and parcel of your faith and your journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not sufficient just to be a lover of God. Of course, everybody is a lover of God. Everybody loves good. Everybody loves beauty. All humanity loves God, but their love is tainted. They don't understand that they love God, the God. If they love beauty, then they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because beauty belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they love good, they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all good. If they love tranquility, they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is tranquility. If they love peace, they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is peace. He is the source of all goodness, and nobody dislikes good. But there's a problem in their understanding of that love. So you require love and jihad al-nafs, love and self-discipline. So these are 2 things to keep in mind. So how is love formed then? Love is born when an individual perceives something praiseworthy or perfect in the beloved. This was also mentioned at the beginning. When somebody sees something that's good, something that's superior, something that's higher, something that's better, they're attracted to that. They're attracted to things that will raise their quality, that will raise them in a level, in their life, in their status, whatever it may be. They're attracted to goodness. So that perception is the first step towards attraction. There must be some form of excellence in the object of love, whether outward beauty or inner virtue, as we divided it in the previous lectures, or an admirable quality in the very least. However, the mere presence of excellence does not guarantee love. Meaning it's not sufficient to have somebody who, for example, has good moral character. That person is not necessarily going to be loved by the society. They say, how can, for example, people be against the Palestinian cause and the Palestinians, where there's a clear distinction between good and evil? There's somebody being oppressed and there's an oppressor. How can there be individuals who are okay with evil? It's because they don't see goodness in the same way that you see it. The problem is the problem of perception. They don't perceive they don't perceive the virtue to be virtuous. It's a problem of perception. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reveals to Nabi Musa alayhi salam, O Moses, love me and make my creation love me. This narration is a hadith Qudsi that was also mentioned, I think in the third or fourth night. Moses alayhi salam responded, O Lord, you know that I love no one as I love you. You are the most beloved to me, but I don't control people's hearts. How can I make them love you? And God replied, remind them of my blessings and my favors. Remind them. So a person, when entrenched in sin and when attached to this world, no longer remembers the blessings and no longer remembers the favors, and sometimes they no longer perceive a blessing to be a blessing. It's a matter of perception. So they have to understand first that good is good. And this is a harsh lesson in life, because we all want good for those around us. We all want not just good for ourselves. We want those around us also to be surrounded by good. Especially when we turn closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we see our friends, family members turning away, leading a life that is harmful to them, either physically or emotionally or spiritually, and we have a need and a desire to save them, to help them. And then we find that they don't want help. They don't want help because they don't perceive that they have a problem in the first place. They don't perceive the good that you're doing is good. And so when you talk to them, it's like you're talking to a wall. They don't understand what you're trying to say. It goes through one ear and out the other. You're trying to highlight the bad and the negative, but they don't see the negative as negative. So it's an issue of perception. So that perception is very, very important in the first place. The second requirement is the second aspect is the degree of perfection in the beloved. Not all virtues are equal. And this is important distinction to be made. Meaning some individuals, or all individuals, they love goodness, they love beauty, they love strength, they love all these attributes, but they don't perceive the infinite aspect of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning they struggle not in perceiving good. They struggle in making that leap or that connection between the good and God. They struggle between making the connection between the beauty and God. Now the philosophers say this is an issue not necessarily entirely the fault of the human being. Because we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond our comprehension. So Allah alone, as He is hard to understand, especially with a limited mind. So it's not that easy to make that connection. And that's why with our intellect, we're called upon to ponder the favors and ponder the blessings. That intellectually we can conclude that these things must have a source. Whoever created this universe, whatever that I perceive and whatever that I like, if I see a beautiful landscape, then that's a glimpse into the power of the Creator. If I see a kind individual, that kindness was given to them. It's borrowed. It's not, doesn't belong to them, right? It was given. Their creations. They were created. And so that's a glimpse to the Creator. It's an idea. It's something that we can see and that we can connect with. And we require that in this plane, in this realm. In the world of images, on this lowest realm, the dunya, we require these external manifestations. And this is the most clear and distinct manifestation is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. There are manifestations of these attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you see that goodness, when you see that beauty, and when you see it, you become attached to it. Like in the character, for example, of the martyr, the late Sayyid, the same thing. Why did his absence have such an effect on individuals? Because he was the closest thing that we can perceive to these characteristics, these attributes. He was a thing of fairy tales in our day and age. You could not imagine somebody with such character being born in this time in this world in these conditions. Especially considering that he was not born in a time and a place where the conditions per se would form an individual that has that character. Born in a place where alcohol is there, corruption is there. Lebanon took time before that the separation took place. For example, I remember meeting Ayatollah al-Asifi before he passed away. And Ayatollah al-Asifi, when I sat with him, I think 6 months before he passed away, he described to me how the different regions in South Lebanon, he said, this area there was a casino, this area there was a bar, areas that I had gone to, areas that I had visited. So even the dynamic, the geography, the society was much different. How could someone born from such conditions come out with such character? Have those characteristics, have those attributes. So when one sees the physical manifestation of these characteristics, they understand God better. They see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in him and through him, and his character and his virtues. They see that through his submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised him, that he nurtured him through his love and through his mercy. So he becomes a mirror that reflects those divine qualities. And so the degrees of perfection are different. So one has to understand these degrees. I remember there was a famous picture of Muhammad Ali, for example, holding a newspaper that says, God is the greatest. Again, emphasizing that what you see is in terms of him saying that he's great and his prowess and his ability, the greatness that you see in him is not as radiant as the greatness of God, attributing everything that he has to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are varying degrees of excellence, varying degrees of perfection, and we shouldn't limit ourselves. Like we said in the example of the person who swims in the ocean and they're entranced by the hues and the colors of the ocean, they never look within, they never look past the surface. And some individuals can have a love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They want to be good individuals, but they can never make that connection. Their love will always be a surface level type of love. Untapped potential, undiscovered potential. And prophets come to highlight that, to enlighten humanity to their potential, what they can possibly reach. What they can possibly reach is themselves. So we can't look and say, well, Imam Ali was like that because he was Imam Ali. The Prophet was like that because he was the Prophet. I can't build internally, I can't make that connection with them because they're a ma'soom and I'm not a ma'soom. But then you look at the companions of the Imams and you see certain examples. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I was saving this for later, but it's relevant to our discussion now. You see the effect of this on the individuals that they raised, that were around them. In a narration, one day Imam Ali alayhi salam said to his companions, my heart is deeply saddened for Abu Dharr al-Ghafari. May God have mercy on him. So he was walking with his companions and he remembered Abu Dharr. And the companions asked, why, O Master? Why, Imam Ali, why are you saddened for Abu Dharr? The Imam replied, on the night when upon the orders of the Khalifa, officials were sent to Abu Dharr's house to take his allegiance for the Khalifa. They handed him 4 bags of coins to pledge allegiance. Abu Dharr became angry at the sight when they tried to bribe him. They're trying to buy his vote. Abu Dharr became angry and said to the officials, you have insulted me in 2 ways. First, you thought I was for sale, that I could be bought, that I have a price, and you came to buy me. Second, is the value of Ali only 4 bags of coins? Do you think I would sell Ali for these 4 bags of coins? I wouldn't exchange all the wealth of the world for a single strand of Ali's hair. And he expelled them and firmly closed the door. The Imam wept, and the companions were surprised at this act. Why is the Imam saddened? And he said, I swear by the Lord who holds Ali's life, that night Abu Dhar closed the door on them, and he and his family had been without food for 3 days. How much would those 4 bags of coins have changed his condition and changed his life? These are individuals who walked in the footsteps of the Masumin. You can't necessarily make that link because it's a mental block. You have to understand that those who walk in their footsteps, this is how they become. And we have, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us that we lived in a time, and we live in a time and an era where there are living manifestations, like the late Sayyid, where we can see the effect of this. Those who walk in the footsteps of Ali ibn Abi Talib, which are the footsteps of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa what they can achieve, and what they can become. The third is recognition of perfection as perfection. It is not enough for a quality to exist. The lover must also value it as a virtue. And we touched upon this in the earlier point. If a person does not recognize something as an excellence, they will not be drawn to it. For example, some people have a mixed understanding of piety, or they don't see the value in piety. They don't see the value in humility. There is an inner sickness within them that makes them attracted to stubbornness, that makes them attracted to arrogance, like those individuals who are attracted to President Trump, for example. Although he's a vile individual, by all standards and all means, Musk, the same individual, Elon Musk, and his father, vile individuals. By all standards and all means, if you look, and it's only because their life is exposed, right? They're in the spotlight. We know about Musk, and we know about his marriages, and we know about his father, and the fact that his father married his stepdaughter or had a child with his stepdaughter and so on. These are vile acts. Vile acts. I mean, if you had a neighbor that did that, you wouldn't want to be around them. If you had a coworker that was like that, you wouldn't want to interact with them. Yet we find individuals that look at these arrogant, vile individuals, and they find that they're attracted to them. They don't see the stubbornness, they don't see the arrogance as a non-virtuous thing. They see it as a virtue. So the understanding of virtue, or they see humility. If they see somebody humble, they say that's some shahar, mu'attar, God help them, God be with them, and their values are twisted. So it's important that we mentally recognize how we perceive things in the first place. We have to understand the value. Where do we take our values from? We take them from the Quran. We take them from the Ahlul Bayt. We have to make sure that everything is put in its place. What makes a person a good person? What makes a person a virtuous person? Whom should I follow? What should I look out for in qualities and characteristics? If we don't take it from the right place, then we're going to be attracted to the wrong people. Even if they have, and many of them, and the only reason people are attracted to them is because they mix haqq with batil. It's not that everything they're saying is wrong. It's that it's a mixed bag. It's dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because we have one life. You don't want to waste your time. People that say, well, as humanity moves forward, they become more ethical. Meaning that because, for example, religious laws can align with the intellect, why don't we leave human beings through trial and error to come to the right conclusions? When was it that women were allowed to own property in the United States? When was it when a woman was allowed to open a bank account? How long have human beings been on this earth? How many millions of years did it take? And how many women had to die, having their money taken from them, having absolutely no rights by any standards, and having the debate, does a woman have a soul? Is a woman being a human being or an animal? Before humanity gave her her most basic rights. So people will be oppressed in that process. If you don't take from the right source, you don't take from the divine source, from the author of existence, your values, then you can go and do the trial and error. But you will suffer. Humanity will suffer. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people will suffer before you get your most basic of rights. So you have to look to the author of existence to understand, Are my values in the first place in the right place? Is my compass directed in the right direction? Where do I get the direction for my moral compass? Where do my morals come from? Because whoever I listen to affects me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, watch that which you eat. All the mufassirin say that that verse doesn't have to do with food. Doesn't have to do with food. It has to do with knowledge. Where do I take my knowledge from? Where do I take my information from? And inshallah, we'll touch upon that when we get to the will of Imam al-Qadim alayhi salam to Hisham in the first section, where he warns him, where he warns Hisham. The fourth thing is focus and concentration. Even when love is present, its intensity depends on the depth of focus. Focus is tawajjuh. Tawajjuh. That's why you say focus in your salah. Sometimes, our problem isn't a problem of understanding. It's a problem of linguistics. And you say, is it that simple? Just changing one word to another word? It really is. It's a sad truth and a sad reality. Now, because people are becoming more familiar with the differences between akhbaris and usulis, and ijtihad allowed, can you do taqleed, and these terminologies that usually were reserved for the seminary, and those who are in the seminary understood who an akhbari is, who an usuli is. Now, because of YouTube and so on, everybody is becoming aware of that distinction between akhbaris and usulis. And so, the difference between akhbaris and usulis, one of the major differences is a linguistical difference. It's the akhbaris believing ijtihad has one definition, right? Ijtihad meaning the person puts effort and comes up with their own ruling, their own opinion. And the usul is saying that's not what we mean by ijtihad. By ijtihad, we're not saying that it's my opinion. Ijtihad is taking the word of the imam, the principle of the imam. The best case scenario is taking the word of the imam, the verse of the Holy Quran, and coming to a hukum, coming to a legal ruling. And in the worst case scenario, if I can't find a word of the imam for a legal scenario, I take a principle that the imam gave, and from it I extract a legal ruling based on a verse of the Holy Quran and a principle that the imam gave. So the source is the Ahlul Bayt. And then they still insisted, no, that ijtihad is your opinion. Why? Because they use the word ijtihad. Just like the word irfan or Sufism, right? People have a problem. The moment you say irfan, the moment you say tasawwuf, first of all, the word irfan was born out of that difference, because they gave us a hard time for using the word tasawwuf, because there were certain Sufi groups that were perverse, and every time you talked about spiritual wayfaring, they said you're becoming like the Sufis. This is Sufism. Say, okay, you know what? Let's just drop the word Sufism and take the word arfan, ma'rifah. Do you have a problem with ma'rifah, getting to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No. Then they made the clear distinction there. So sometimes it's a linguistic difference. And the same thing applies to tawajjuh. With regards to tawajjuh, tawajjuh is focus, right? It's attraction. They say that there's the law of attraction. When a person is focusing on something, you wake up every morning, as like some motivational speakers like to say, you look in the mirror, you tell yourself, I'm going to become a millionaire. You say enough times and you focus on money, money will come to you. This is tawajjuh. This is what it comes down to. Law of attraction, you want to call it focus. What Islam is coming to teach is that whatever you focus on, that will be that which you receive. Even in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, if you focus on the positive attributes of God, and you do husn al-dhan billah, and you perceive God as compassionate and merciful, then He will behave with you in accordance to how you perceive Him, in accordance to your tawajjuh to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what's the difference between those who, again, they change the spiritual concepts and they taint them? They tell you to focus on money, they tell you to focus on wealth, they tell you to focus on power and on jobs and so on, and the Islamic perspective that we learn from our ad'i. We say, don't focus on the rizq, focus on the raziq, focus on the source. You're focusing on the surface level. Nobody's against happiness. Nobody's against wealth. Nobody's against these things. But we say, لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. It all belongs to God. It's like saying, for example, if I wanted, a liter of water, right? But I receive 100 liters of water. Because I received the 100, I already received the 1. If you focus on the hereafter and you focus on the source of rizq, you will receive the rizq. Your tawajjuh, your focus should be on God. And you will receive from the rich, the riches. You will receive power from the powerful. You will receive peace from the peaceful. And this is the difference. It's telling you not to focus on the surface level. These surface level things are what animals focus on. Surface level pleasures. You're a human being. You have an intellect. You can recognize that which is higher, and you shouldn't sell yourself short. You should focus on what's higher for you, what's better for you. So religion doesn't call upon you to be any less of a human being. It calls upon you to embrace your humanity in the fullest sense, and your potential in the fullest sense. And that's what the focus in the tawajjuh is. The philosophers say the principle is akin to the effect of a magnifying glass. The ordinary sunlight does not set paper aflame, but when focused through a lens, it generates heat and ignites a fire. Meaning, you might have that intrinsic love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you don't start perceiving the world through the lens of love, and your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't a love-based relationship, it's transactional, it's need-based, it's want-based, then it won't be intensified. If you start to focus on that love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it comes down to a consideration. When I'm making a life choice, that I focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I make a life choice, I ask myself, where does the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His pleasure lie? If I commit an act of worship, I do it بنية القربة, nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the angle of love. If I want to gain nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm not asking of anything. I remember going to one of the students of Ayatollah al-Kashmiri, and I asked him, because they would give out certain adhkar and invocations, I asked them, can you recite any name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or any dhikr that you feel connected to without a certain prescribed number of times or days? What if there's just a name? What if you just want to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He said, this is the most superior form of dhikr. It's a dhikr where you want nothing but to speak to God. All you want is God. Because most people's relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is transaction based. We just want to know what to do and what not to do. That's it. We want to have that legal relationship with God. This is the halal and this is the haram. And praying the first of its time is not wajib. So I'll postpone my prayers till the, before, for example, I'll postpone Asr till a little bit before Maghrib. This is my relationship with God. But if you look at it from a lover's perspective, if you had somebody that you loved and you called upon them 5 times and they never respond, or they respond very, very late, and then when they go and they stand before you, they're not in the mood. They're huffing and they're puffing and they're waiting for the conversation to end. How would you deal with that person? Would you be able to put up with them? Or would you not deal with them anymore? The lover begins to perceive everything from the lens of love. Their dua, their salah, how they eat. They know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like seeing that their stomach is full. Most of us, even by biological standards, we eat more than what we require. If you ask any nutritionist, when you decide to lose weight and you go and join these programs where they make food for you, you look at it and you're like, that's very little food. They'll tell you that's all you need. If that's all I need, and I'm a traveler in this world, then what have I been doing my entire life? I've been eating more than I have to eat. I've been sleeping more than I have to sleep. Everything that I do is indulgence. It's excess. So when we start to perceive things from the lens of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our behavior begins to change. Our relationship with God, in turn, begins to perception and focus. These are 3 things that are required in the journey of love towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowledge of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, of His names, of His attributes, and so on. And having the correct hierarchy within our minds. Perception, we have to start fixing our morals and our values to align with that which the Beloved likes and wants, what He considers to be virtuous, and focus. That we have to have that presence of heart and presence of mind. Inshallah, wafaqana Allah wa iyyakum. Inshallah, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد. Alhamdulillah, today we've been given a bit of time, so more time than yesterday. I thought we were going to have the Q&A yesterday. So for those who want to stay for the Q&A, أنا بخدمتكم.